Hello, all of you sensitive, intuitive souls out there. This is Bevan Neiman Cortez, one of the co-hosts for this event. I'm so honored to introduce you today to Aurora Farber, who is a feminine leadership mentor, an intuitive oracle, and a sacred business alchemist. She helps awaken leaders, creatives, and change makers like you burn away toxic patriarchal patterns, ignite their feminine fire. Can't wait to talk more about this. To bring in presence, pleasure, and play, and become catalysts of sustainable prosperity in the world. Welcome, Aurora, to the summit. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Bevan. I am delighted to be here, and I can't wait to see what arises from this beautiful conversation.
And we're going to dive deep into one of your specialty areas, which is highlighted by your background. We're going to talk about the magic of the moon and how this can help us amplify our powers of empathy and sensitivity and intuition. So could you tell us a little bit more about why you consider empathy and intuition to be a superpower?
Yes, absolutely. I love this topic. I love speaking about the moon. And before I begin, I just want to energetically extend love and gratitude to all those who are here listening, who are sensitive, who are empathic, who are intuitive. If you're called to the summit, we are in the same fractal family. So I'm just delighted to connect with you and share a little bit more about the magic of the moon. And, why I decided to speak on this is because I often feel, as an intuitive and sensitive person myself, with a lot of empathy, that this is an opportunity for us to reclaim those as superpowers. For so long, they've almost seemed like a hindrance, or at least in my life, oh, you're too sensitive, or can't you just not feel so much and just get with the program? Or can you even trust your intuition? You should trust your logic. Like, all of these messages that we have received culturally is something that I've been reworking, reweaving in my life. And as I've stepped more into the path of intuition, I've found and discovered, to my delight, that this is such a magical way of living. Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys says that intuition is the way that the universe speaks to us. And so this is my invitation for anyone listening to think about these gifts of sensitivity, of intuition, of being empathic as a superpower. Don your superpower cape and be a blessing in a world that is in such need of guidance. The old ways of having the strategy and the plan and trying to figure it all out before it even happens, it doesn't work anymore. And we need people like us who are willing to enter the mystery, dive deep, and explore with our hearts open, our minds soft, and our backs strong.
I love that sentiment. So beautiful, engaging all the aspects of self in this process. Would you share with us, how did you discover, because the moon is often very much aligned with intuition, right? Our deeper inclinations. How did you really discover that that was one of your superpowers?
Yeah, so I have been intuitive for all my life. My intuitive gift is primarily clairvoyance. So I tend to see symbols. I have vivid dreams. I speak in words like, oh, I see. So I see things. I see patterns with my clients and in my life. So this is my primary strength. And I've always had this. But the connection to the moon first came to me on my journey as a 13 moon priestess with Elaine Kalila Dowdy and Ariel Spilsbury. That's from Mystery School. So I was diving into just the energy of the moon and the gift of the moon that invites us to know that we are always shifting and changing, like this new kind of nature that is especially attuned to women in our bodies. And this almost permission to say, oh, you don't have to be on and bright and shining and the same like the sun, but you can shift and change. So that was how I began this journey of diving more deeply into the moon. But the real journey was a journey into a dark night of the soul when I received a diagnosis of melanoma. And that, and even metaphorically, just feel into that, Bevan, it's like, oh, okay, the sun, it's a sun cancer. And so what had happened to me is that I was afraid to go out into the sun because of this diagnosis. And so my time outside became the nighttime. And that's when I began to have an embodied relationship with the moon, to be actually see the shifts and changes, to see that crescent moon that went to the full moon, that came in again and came back into the darkness. And so as I noticed and began to sync to that rhythm, because of course in that diagnosis, I was also very depressed and I felt kind of flat and hopeless. It was really a shadowland period for me. And it was sitting in that moonlight, looking at that full moon. I had this radical idea that maybe this point in my life was just a new moon kind of time, like a time in the darkness for me to get quiet, to notice what was important, to honor my body more. And that one day I would be filled again with energy and light, and I would come back to that full moon period. And so that gave me hope, and that lifted me out of the depression. And once that happened, I thought, why don't I just keep living this way? Why don't I just keep allowing and giving myself permission, which was not easy to do. And it's still not easy for me to do, to give myself permission to rest and to take time off. But because of the moon, it's like this reminder in the sky that tells me that it is time to rest. And now it's time to be seen. It's time to start something. It's time to harvest something. And this is how I began to have a practical relationship with the moon.
I love that. I love that story. And, sometimes these really difficult things that can come up in life can open us, I guess, into such a gift, right? And so, so much of our world is around what happens in the daytime and how we're out there and being fiery and taking action. And the moon is an entirely different energy than that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the moon's essence and how you've communed with that?
So for me, when I work with something, I try to feel into the energy of it. And so being here on Earth, I began to notice the energy of the sun, which rises and sets every day. And it's based on this 24-hour cycle. It rises, it sets, it rises, it sets. It's always giving light. And this is really the way that we're taught to be, because now our world is actually filled with so much light because we have electricity. A long time ago, we didn't have electricity. And so we were more attuned to the natural rhythm of coming into the darkness. We also didn't have technology and Netflix and all the things that keep us up longer than we're meant to, right? So as I felt into the energy of the moon and being here on the earth, instead of that cycle of starting and then finishing, maybe resting, maybe not resting, maybe watching Netflix, finally sleeping, starting it all over again, I felt into what it was like to be here on Earth and to have this moon that is orbiting us rather than us orbiting the sun, to have this support of feeling like, oh, this moon is surrounding us, it's orbiting us, it's reflecting the light of the sun, and it's showing us different faces and different phases of how we can live our lives. For so long, and even now, many farmers and agriculturalists, they plant by the moon because nature is tied into this rhythm. The tides are tied into the rhythm of the moon, and we are tied into the rhythm of the moon, but we've forgotten that we're tied into it. And so for me, like just having that embodied knowing that this is this beautiful orb in the sky that is constantly surrounding us, holding us, it's held in the orbit of the earth and reflecting to us how we can live our lives. We can, and we are meant to have times of rest and to have times of expansion. It's our birthright. And so for me, like that piece, it took me coming into the darkness, into deep rest, even depression, for me to finally look up in the sky and say, oh, I am held. Yes, the universe is talking to me, letting me know this. And this is this is why I'm so passionate about the moon, because I feel, especially if you're empathic or sensitive or very intuitive, this is also a strength that you can draw on the power of the moon to fortify your knowing that these three things are truly gifts, that they are superpowers.
Mm. And that all inspired you then to create what you call the moon cycle power path and also 4 lunar archetypes. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, so, everything, I love how life kind of weaves us into these different pathways. And so that situation occurred for me. And then later, as I stepped more onto my path and I was writing for this series called The New Feminine Evolutionary, I was invited to write for a book called Sacred Body Wisdom. And I just knew, as an intuitive, I knew I was meant to write about the moon, but I didn't know what I was meant to write. I just knew that it had a powerful impact on me. And one of the things about intuition, and for anyone who's very sensitive or empathic, writing for me is a way to receive my wisdom in a way that's concrete and solid, something that I can reflect on, something that can really ground me. And so as I began to write all this stuff about the moon, and it just wasn't it, because I know when I'm writing something well, I have an emotional reaction to it. And so I took myself back to that time and that place when I had melanoma so that I could remember what that felt like. And what came about through writing this chapter was not a description of how to work with the moon, the different phases, the history of the moon. Instead, it was that moment when I remember that I was still in that sort of flatlands, those shadowlands, and I was listening to a song, and it was a Spanish love song. And so I got up and danced. And as the person was singing about this love, this, how much I love you, how much I love you, I began to connect with my body and notice that, oh, how much I love you. And yet there was this big wall in front of me, because I realized that this whole journey with my melanoma through the writing is that I had had such a disconnection from my body. Even before I had this diagnosis, I had put up bricks of stories of that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't, thin enough, that I wasn't smart enough, all of these different things in which there was just not enough. And I recognized that a lot of this stuff didn't come from my lived experience. It came culturally, it was prescribed. I saw it through commercials. And I noticed that there were this litany of voices that said all of these things, that you are not enough of this and you're too much of that. And so from that, I began to write, and I began to think, that is the solar, toxic, patriarchal world that's telling me you're not enough. There's not enough time, and get with the program. So working with the moon, I inquired inside and I said, what if I had been given as a little girl voices in the moonlight? And that's a chapter of this book. It's called Voices in the Moonlight. And there were these archetypes that spoke to me. And so I connected with these archetypes of the new moon, the first quarter moon, the full moon, the third quarter moon. What did they feel like? The new moon for me feels like the mother, the seed that's planted. The first quarter moon is the sprout when action takes place, time to come into your queen, to sit on your throne and to look at your queendom. The full moon is the time of celebration, of joy, of ecstasy, of sensuality, of play. That's the goddess energy of being both human and divine. And then finally, the sage in that third quarter moon, the harvesting time to harvest your wisdom, to complete your projects, and then to let it all go and come back to rest in the mother. And so I wrote in this chapter these different voices. If I had heard the voice of a mother, what would that sound like? And I would love to read that, if that's all right. So it's from this book, Sacred Body Wisdom, just to give you a taste. And this is an invitation to anyone listening. If you felt that sense of disconnection from your body, or a sense of you're not enough, or you're too much, or you don't quite know your place in the world, the mother archetype is such a grounding archetype, can help you feel stable, help you feel loved. And I just invite you to imagine growing up, if you had heard these kinds of messages, this message from the mother of the new moon. At the new moon, be a mother to your body. Beloved, precious one, you are loved no matter what. I am here for you always, in all ways. In the darkness, there is a new beginning. Feel my arms around you, soothing you, holding you, supporting you. Rest, relax, and be renewed. Forgive the past and begin afresh. Plant your heart intentions for this new beginning. Each cycle, a chance of renewal. Each ending, a new beginning. You are precious, beloved. Like a baby I hold in my arms, I will always love you. On this new moon, cradle yourself in your own arms and love like a mother.
So lovely. I was just closing my eyes for a moment just to receive and be in that energy of just taking in all of your wisdom. I love that nurturing aspect of this. And you share that being in flow with these four lunar archetypes and knowing where we are in that cycle can help us find more ease and grace and harmony and joy in our lives. Can you tell us more about how that works and how we can connect in?
Absolutely. So, this beautiful orb in the sky is here to remind us of these kind of energies. So, if you're new to the moon, it's simple to think about the new moon and the full moon. A next level is like noticing the first quarter moon in between those 2 weeks and the third quarter moon, and getting yourself anchored as to how the moon is holding you in this moment. And then you can feel into those archetypes. Archetypes are so powerful because they're um, collective patterns of consciousness, and they're easily recognizable. So if I say love like a mother, or reign like a queen, or shine like a goddess, or lead like a sage, they all have a different kind of resonance, a different frequency. So imagine if you began this next moon cycle starting with loving yourself, loving your body like a mother would, like this baby that you held in your arms. And then as you went into the next week, you sat on your throne, you called in that energy of the sovereign queen that is whole and complete unto herself, and made decisions, began your projects, took inspired action. Then you came into the goddess, the full moon, and you took time to celebrate, not just keep going like a taskmaster, but took time to celebrate, to connect with others, to connect with your own joy, to have more play and pleasure in your life. And then finally at the third quarter moon to finalize things or notice where they're at and perhaps seed them for the next new moon, or to let go of some of those things. That's the other thing that I love about the energy of the moon. Just the light of the sun always shining. It's that sense of go, 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 go. But the moon gives us this chance of rising, swelling, and then coming back down and letting go. For me, that's been one of the most powerful aspects of living with this lunar rhythm, is to give myself this permission of letting go. And even as I seed something, say in the energy of the queen, to have that energy of, yes, I'm going to go full on, full heartedly for it, but I'm not going to be attached to the outcome. I'm going to allow myself to float with what comes. And it's such a more flexible, easeful way of living. And I think our traditional goal planning teaches us to, set a target, set a goal, and then we go for it. And if we miss it in any way, we take it in as something, especially as women, that we didn't do enough. And it feeds that wound of not enough again, right? And instead to have this energy of the moon, that you just follow the rhythm of the moon. And like you can connect it to a harvesting cycle where when you plant a seed, you don't know if it's going to bloom or not. And yet, does that take away the joy that you have in planting it and tending it and watching it grow? And maybe it doesn't grow this season, but then it grows the next. So there's just so much medicine in connecting to that very fluid, supportive energy of the moon.
Well, of course, across the world, we're seeing a lot of the rise of the divine feminine, regardless of what gender you are, just an awareness of this kind of secular movement and flow that you're talking about here. And what are you noticing about that as you look out into our world? We've kind of lost that for a very long time, and now it's rising again. And I'm sure that's really exciting for you to see.
Yes, absolutely. It's, the moon is so connected to the feminine. And it's not that the feminine has to overtake the masculine, it's the feminine can help heal and bring the masculine into balance. Through the last hundreds, thousands of years, where this masculine has, taken root, there have been a lot of advancements, a lot of achievements, and yet it's been at the expense of slowing down, of rest, of creating an inclusive whole world, because it's so centered on getting to that goal at all costs. And that's what I love about this energy of the moon, that it invites us to come into cyclical and seasonal ways and rhythms of living, so that we're not so attached. And when we're not so attached to that thing that's out in front of us, where are we? We are right here. We are present. And to live your life in presence is such a gift. I think that's one of the things that has been most meaningful for me, and what I love to teach and connect and help people understand is this place here that's the heart, that is the body, that is the home. When we can connect to the beauty of that, no matter what our outer conditions are, then we can find true joy and gratitude in our life. We know that this connection to ourselves is what brings us here and now, and it is why we're here now. It helps us to remember that we have come here for a reason, and it's not outside of ourselves, it's in us. This is what the energy of the moon is. It reflects to us who we already are.
And would you be willing to share maybe some just practical ways and tips that you work with the moon and your intuition, like in your day-to-day life? Like, how can people who are listening really start to implement some of these things as we begin to sync ourselves with these different phases?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would suggest is to just notice where we're at in the moon phase, to become aware. And so it's simple to do. You can, Google a moon phase calendar. You can add that to your diary or to your online calendar, and just to become aware and notice, connect that to you. Remember that this moon is surrounding and supporting you. And how is that? How are you at the new moon phase? How are you at the full moon phase? Notice what you notice about yourself. And then if you find yourself always the same, always on, which is what I was doing, then you can attune to the cycle and allow this cycle to support the changes you want to make, so you can begin to slow down. Even if it's just taking 5 minutes around the new moon, or it's taking an afternoon nap, or taking time to connect with some friends around the full moon, begin to incorporate these energies of Mother, Queen, Goddess, and Sage into your life, so that you begin to embody this energy, and you begin to attune to the moon in all the ways that it can support you find more flow and ease and grace and pleasure in your life.
And I suppose that a lot of what you're talking about here and your journey with melanoma and your healing process, it was a part of the catalyst that that inspired you to become a divine feminine mentor and leader, teaching other women about leadership. Can you tell us more about that and how that emerged?
Yeah, so for me, again, it's that energy of the feminine. And I feel like the more I embrace that energy inside of me, of course, learning about it, being mentored in it was a very important part of my journey. But I think the next step for me was having that dark night of the soul and really attuning my own energy to the moon to help me really claim my intuitive abilities. Before that journey, I didn't consider myself an oracle. I didn't read cards for people. But through attuning to intuition, which leads to more synchronicity and magic in your life, it helps you to have trust that it is true that the universe is here to help you, that the universe is whispering and laying breadcrumbs for you to follow this new path. The more that you do it, the more trust you have in this universe and in your own ability to connect with it through your intuition, through your sensitivity, through your ability to feel. In this world, so often, at least for me growing up, I was often told, "Oh, you're so tenderhearted." And I hated that. And at the same time, I knew it was true and I loved that part of me, but I just wanted to be tough. Why couldn't I be tough? And not cry at things and feel so much. And now what I've learned is that through feeling, even several times in this conversation, as I've been speaking, I can feel tears welling up in my eyes. And I used to feel so ashamed of that. But now what I've realized is that vulnerability and tenderness is the way that we really connect with one another, because we see that we are human, that we do feel and we are capable of feeling. So for anyone who has the superpower of the senses, including intuition, including all the senses, your big heart, it is such a superpower. It is such a gift. And I feel like we are here to really reclaim that for ourselves first, and then allow ourselves to be the vessel to provide that space of healing for others.
I love that you're role modeling this emotional intelligence. And several times I've gotten a little teary eyed or can feel something really big rising in me. And I love that you're encouraging us just to allow that to be there and to flow and not try to suppress, as we have maybe been taught by society. So as we begin to step in and align ourselves with the cycle and gain this awareness as you're talking about, what have you noticed with the people that you work with? What changes in their world when they really become more attuned to this feminine, emotional, intuitive, reflective part of themselves? What happens for them? What shifts?
Yeah, so I've been speaking about that recently, thinking about how this gene key of seriousness to ecstasy via delight is here and present, and how this energy of delight and ecstasy, Richard Rudd says that in order to come into our own ecstasy or delight, we have to undo and unlearn some of our masculine traits, the masculine ways of being. And so for me, connecting with the moon is a superpower. Connecting with my intuition, with my sensitivity, it is something that I wholeheartedly espouse for people, because I feel it's what we need here in the world right now. And so for some of you, you may connect with your intuition via clairvoyance, seeing things, feeling things through the body, clairsentience, clairaudience, claircognizance. There are different ways to connect to your intuition, but whatever that is, being able to receive it and follow these breadcrumbs and feel the support of the universe, I feel like that's the way that we can find our way forward in a world that no longer has a map to where we're going. And we need brave pioneers who are willing to role model, like you said, to break the bounds of this is what you're supposed to do and just be who we actually are in this moment and connect more heart to heart rather than head to head, so that we can make these changes that our earth so desperately needs right now.
I love that. I love that. And, you started to talk about some of these, masculine aspects of self that we're unlearning. Can you maybe name a couple of those so people can get really clear on, oh yeah, that reflects something that I've done as a pattern, and maybe I'd like to explore a different way. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to me is this idea of hierarchy, that there is something above you, some knowing, some person, some place to get to that you're not quite there yet. There's a way in which hierarchy it's a power dynamic from the top down. And I think that is something that we can begin to rework and reweave and turn it into something more like synarchy, where we are all contributing to a great vision, something like the Shift Network. Creating these beautiful conversations with people around the world who have a common vision of a world that's united, of a world that is in a shift and that needs people to hear, to know, to feel that there are new possibilities that await. I think that is one of the main things, hierarchy and synarchy, like weaving that together. And then I think another is competition, especially for women. Our power for so many thousands of years was based on beauty or wit because we were traded. We were commodities to help, others rise right into this hierarchy. And if we can let go of that competitiveness, and when we feel competition with someone, to come into our hearts and notice, what's the shadow bringing up in me? Like, bring it back into self and say, oh, why am I judging that? Is there something in me that I'm judging? Because when we can bring it back in, then that opens up for collaboration. So moving from competition to collaboration, so that we can cross-pollinate and make change happen much more quickly. I think those are like two main aspects. And I guess the third would be the one that's coming to me is compassion, is to bring more compassion to this world rather than what would be the masculine opposite of that. What's coming to me is just this sort of tunnel vision of, I need to get there and there's no heart in what I'm doing, like not connected to the heart. And so I think that's the feminine trait that we can bring into the world, is compassion and forgiving ourselves, having compassion with ourselves first and foremost, forgiving ourselves of anything that we may hold on to that keeps us from fully being here and being here in our heart.
Such powerful shifts that we can make. And we have the opportunity to get out there and to role model this just through our presence, right? Our quiet presence, the way that we show up. I love your work, Aurora, and I know that you have so many resources for people who are interested in taking a deeper dive into the cycles of the moon, into the feminine mystery. Where can people connect with you after this event?
Yes, I would love to connect with you. And you can find me at aurorafarber.com online and on Instagram, aurora.farber.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I just wonder, as we get ready to close this conversation, and you're thinking, okay, there's something wanting to flow through you, some message that wants to come through to the collective of people who are listening right now. What would you tell them about this journey to take a deeper dive into the feminine, the intuitive, the empathic, all of the things that you've been describing here today?
What I'd love to say is that you never know where life will lead you, especially when you're willing to step full-hearted into the mystery. I'm sitting here today being interviewed by the Shift Network. I never knew that I would be here. And it just reminds me of years ago, more than a decade ago, when I was living in China and I tuned into the Shift Network, which wasn't so easy to find back then, especially in China. And through that, I heard a program that led me on my spiritual path and helped me step more into my intuition, to this journey. And I never thought that I would be here. I just kept following the breadcrumbs. Then, as I continued the journey, kept asking the universe to guide me, saying this simple prayer: I am willing, show me the way. I am willing, show me the way. And my mission is based on a vision that I have. And I'd love to share that with everyone, because sometimes just this little vision, you never know where it's going to lead. And I don't know where it's going to lead still, but it has led me here to connect with you and to connect with our wonderful audience. And so my vision was that I was on a boat, a single boat, And there was an island in front of me, and it was aflame with a volcano. A dragon was in the sky hurling fire at the sea, and I was on an open sea. I had my hands at my heart like this, and a light was emanating from my heart. And I began to hear the sounds of other women, and I looked behind me, and there were a fleet of women, each in their own boat, a fleet of sovereign women without oars, standing there, lighting up the world with love at the center of their hearts and singing these songs of harmony, even as the world was burning down around them. And so that's my guiding vision of why I'm here. And it's what gets me up every day. It's what picks me up when I fall to the floor sometimes, because I do. And it keeps me going. And so that's my final thing is, whatever your vision is for your life right now, listen to it. Pay attention to your intuition. Pay attention to your inner voice, because you never know where that might lead you. And I'm so happy to be here today.
And it feels like there's a little bit of the full moon energy that we're celebrating this cyclical process where you first learned about shift, and now, of course, you're appearing on shift and sharing your wisdom. How incredible is that?
Goosebumps.
We thank you so much for bringing all of yourself, for sharing so vulnerably, for being so open, for role modeling the divine feminine leadership that our world needs. We're so happy to connect with you today, and so proud to have you on the summit.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I'm just delighted to be here, and I'm sending so much love to you and to all those who are listening here.